Hey everyone, in this video I'll be showing you a stealth archer build in Palworld's 1.0 update that's honestly quite overpowered. Now the crazy thing about this is you can turn invisible with Leezpunk skill, so you can live out your Skyrim dream of being able to just take everything on from the stealth. Now this works in the hard tower bosses, but I just want to clarify that the stealth isn't perfect when it comes to boss encounters, but it can work, and you can see there we're able to take down hard mode bosses with this setup. And this is using regular world settings for single player. So 1x on all that. And here is the party comp that I was using. However, we can swap some out because I'll be honest, Robin Quill's special ability is for bows, but there are better options. Now, to get the full stealth, we gotta have a Leezpunk here. Now, its special skill, Too Cool to Be Seen, allows you to turn invisible, make them undetectable to enemies for 20 seconds. If you have the max condense here and you get hit, it gives you a cooldown of around 7 seconds, so you can pop this back up really quickly. It also has great coverage for moves, with some of the best being Apocalypse here for it. And I would recommend the following passive skills for everybody in the party. Vanguard gives a 10% increase in the player attack. You can have 5 pals with this for 50%. It's obviously a very big buff. I also like to have the Idiosyncratic here, which will give you health regeneration rate, and it also boosts up the defense of the pal, which helps with their survivability because they will be out fighting. Now I also throw in Stronghold Strategist for a 50% defense boost if you have 5 pals that have this equipped. Vanguard being the most important, but this is a nice one to have too. Reload doesn't really apply here, so we're not going to use the reload specialist there. And I like to throw Immortality on here so that they have a bit of sustain, as let's be honest, Leezpunk is not a very strong pal, but it lets us turn invisible, so Immortality lets us stay alive for longer. When it's fully condensed here, as well as awakened with max trust, it'll get a attack stat with the following stats of around 2,941, which is serviceable. It's enough to stay out there and survive, and it has a respectable defense stat too. Now for the rest of the team combinations, there's a few that I would always have equipped, Solen being one of them. It gives an 80% attack boost here, and I cannot state how powerful that is. It's obviously like if we have a Vanguard on all of our pal, that's 50%. Having 80% on top of that is incredible. So Solen is pretty much always going to be in the party just because of its super powerful skills here. And we're also going to want to have Lumen. Now, this is a special pal because its damage is going to stack multiplicatively instead of additively. So what that means is that if you have player damage buffs like 80%, it's going to absorb that 80% into its 30% increase. So it's not just taking that and boosting it up 30% more. It's taking the amount of damage that we got buffed, and then 0.3 of that is going to get applied at an explosion, and that is obviously a massive amount of damage boost. On any arrow build, you should always have a Lumen here. It is just by far the best. So that 30 damage, you may think 35% sounds better. This is way more damage that you're getting. So that's why I don't fully recommend Robin Quill, and I will show alternatives here. But yeah, Lumen and Solen are the two most ideal to have on here. Now, since arrows are really good at getting weak points, Vanworm Crest is another great choice because this gives a 50% damage boost on enemy weak points. You can also throw in regular Vanworm here for a 40% increase, and they do stack, so you can actually get some respectable damage from there. So that's why I wouldn't fully recommend Robin Quill. As cool as Robin Quill's redesign is, it just struggles with the overall damage output. 35% is nice, but we could then throw on something else into the party, like a Crowling's Terra, for example. Now, this partner skill is interesting. When attacking an enemy weak point, increases the power of the next weak point attack by 60%. So that is actually a higher boost than Vanworm Crypt's 50%. The only problem is you have to hit a weak point in order for this to activate. So I personally prefer to have Crowling's Terra over Robin Quill, despite Robin Quill feeling more like an arrow build. But if you want to have Robin Quill just for the theming, go ahead with that. It works perfectly fine. This would be an ideal stack, but there are other ways that we can build around this, because you can have Leezpunk out, and let's say your health goes down low. You can swap out one of these here and throw in like Felbat or everyone's favorite Lavander here, as they're going to give you a 9% life steal while the pal is out. So you can swap them out. The arrows do insane damage. You get your health back, and then we'd swap back to Leezpunk and turn invisible. You can either use the Eidrolons here if you want to have something that is going to give you some movement speed to attack from, and you could replace one of these here, although you can ride on like Vanworm Crest back, so that is an option despite it not being like super fast. Eidrolon is a nice choice too. Now, as much as I like the status appliers like Ivy Covered and Burn, these don't work well on weapons that shoot slowly, like the bow. So, unfortunately, it's only 6 buildup per attack. The combat SMG makes a big difference there. But if there's a particular enemy that you're going against, like a grass type boss like Lylene, Chilled Ignis or Ragnarok can be great, and even Wixen, which can change their arrow types to fire and increase their damage by 50%. Same thing applies against the water boss in this game, Xiaolong, and Panthalus. Panthalus gets shredded by having Prickster Lux here, which lets you get 50% extra damage and turns it to electric, which doubles it as well. I'd also recommend having Hell Zephyr or Beacon for a flying mount. So you can swap out like Kryling's Terra there, for example, and still have like this stealthy setup. Although against certain boss like Panthalus, I'd recommend just taking Leezpunk off and using one of these. There's also water type attacks with Azarobe there, so you can swap that out. You can also have dark types with Hell Zephyr or Wixen Noct, and ice type attacks with Beacon Christ here, so you can go with that, or alternatively throw in Frostallion. Despite the frost not being super highly effective, this is a good choice. And you can also go with something like Frostallion Noct if you want to change your attack type to dark for like neutral pal farming. This will also apply blind, but it's not going to apply it very consistently. There are other pals like Robin Quill Terra, which increases your bow charge speed. This doesn't actually benefit us that much, in all honesty. And I guess the last recommendation you could also sub in is Lylene Noct. I really like them because they give you a big heal. If your team goes down, Lylene Noct's heal will revive them and give them to 95% of their health, which is incredible. And I guess another little tiny recommendation, you could throw in the Pure here, which will give you an even faster cooldown on Leezpunk skills so you can get back into the fight faster. And as for equipment that we want to have on our character here, obviously the best possible bow, mechanical being the absolute best of the 24,000 attack, obviously amazing. But if you have to use it like an advanced bow or a compound bow, just use the best available until you're able to get the mechanical bow. I also like to have as a backup weapon Beam Scatter, Combat SMG, and the drone launcher can be used at all times, and it's just good for a little bit of extra chip damage. Now, one of the pendants I'd recommend having on your player is the attack pendant here. This will give you a 15% increase to your overall attack, and if we pair that with the Dojin emblem here, that gives you a 20% attack increase, as well as our pal a 20% attack increase. I also like to throw in the Lord of the Underworld's baton here, but depends on what boss you're going up against. Like if we're going against a water type, you can swap electric moves and throw in the Lord of Lightning's baton there for another boost to the overall pal's damage. These increase their attack power by 20% and increase the elemental attack by 20%, so they're very good to have. I also like to have the Airwalkers for additional jumps. These are really good on the bow because you can charge up your bow while jumping and avoiding attacks, and it allows you to hit weak points on things like Panthalus a lot easier, so it works really great. I would also recommend using Mamoret's Curry. This is just going to give you a 25% increase to your overall attack there, which is incredible, and you can always buff up your pal with this as well. Now, the moves that we'd like to have on this is going to depend on the boss that we're going against. For Panthalus and Xiaolong, I like to roll with Thunder Ray and Thunderstorm and Apocalypse, which is just an incredibly powerful skill. However, if we're going against like the final boss of the game, you can swap this out and throw on like Circle Vine and Sand Twister. These attacks have multi-hits, which lets it do some insane stuff against boss type enemies, which makes them a very valuable thing to have. But you can also Elemental Match. The damage Leezpunk does is not insanely high, but these three moves are the most effective in the game, in my opinion. And you can see it here, Sand Twister's actually doing some pretty respectable damage there, so I only fired off a couple arrows. Against certain bosses, it is really challenging to use the invisibility just because of these large hit attacks will take you out of it, so the invisibility is best used outside of actual combat. And this pal isn't even spec for pal damage, but you saw there, like the multi-hit attacks here just do huge work against this boss. And to finish it off, we have our arrows there. Yeah, that was fast. So where the invisibility really helps is when you're exploring the overworld here. So you can see we can turn invisible here, and it's a very long time there. We're invisible around 20 seconds. So yeah, you can actually go ahead and explore and avoid impacting any of the enemies here. Making this actually a really useful skill if you're doing stuff like in the early game section. So you can just go ahead there and start off a fight, and you see it there. We have enough damage to be able to take it out. Loon being a massive sorcerer damage there with the explosion. So again, if you're going against a boss, it's probably best to not do the stealth archer approach. I just want to do this as a big Skyrim fan, and it's probably best to swap out for some of the elemental swapping type pals here, or you can alternatively throw on something like Robin Quill over Leezpunk if you find his skills not helping, and probably best choice to be to bring out Felbat for that lifesteal, as we can do some insane damage numbers. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed, and we'll catch you guys all in the next video.